Hi, first let me preface this by saying, and I know a lot of you are going to forget this, I am not bashing Sound Devices equipment. I don't own any, but if I was a professional audio recordist, I would buy one in a heartbeat and I would recommend them. This is not about that. This is about corporate integrity or engineering integrity, the ability of a company or a group of people, group of engineers, to where they draw the line between engineering and scientific fact and fantasy. Where do you draw that line? And if somebody contacts you and say, hey, listen, you're representing fantasy as fact. It's like the Buzz Lightyear to infinity is beyond. That you're actually saying there's something beyond infinity. That no, that's wrong, and you should fix your technical documentation. So this actually began with Rode making false claims about 32-bit float, not Sound Designs to me, though Sound Devices. Sorry, so Sound Devices. Yeah, I mean some of the stuff that they put out, it didn't. Anyway, well, let's just start with that. So in 2022, March of 2022, they came out with the 32-bit float files explained, and they basically go through this file and they explain 32-bit float, and they make some. They say some things that I believe are completely wrong. So they say there is in fact so much headroom that from a fidelity point of view, it doesn't matter where gains are set with recording. Now, I think that's completely false. That is a fantasy. So I contacted Sound Designs and had a long discussion with one of their tech people, and somewhat of a peeing match back and forth, but whatever. We ultimately both agreed at the end. I sent him the article I wrote about it, and he basically said, well, first he agreed, and then he said, I admit I pulled the variable gain stage metric out of conceptual understanding and has no basis in fact that I'm aware of. And then, he sort of ends I send him, he sends me some files. I do some analysis with Python on the data. I say, this doesn't seem right to me. And he basically ends with, again, what I would expect them to say, and engineers say. I've had to talk enough people off ledges who want 32-bit float for everyday production, thinking that they can omit gain staging mic technique without problems arising. I care more that people understand gain staging because 32-bit float without a lack of, but whatever. Anyway, he's agreeing. I mean, again, I haven't found that any engineer disagrees with this stuff. But then they came out with this file again, just slightly edited, just recently in July 2024, saying the same thing. There's in fact so much headroom that from a fidelity point of view, it doesn't matter where gain is set when recording. Now, again, from Sound Devices' point of view, they're saying, listen, we're just going to help our customers get the best audio out of our devices. And again, I respect that, and I'm sure that's what he does. But is it right then to say in your technical literature that you don't have to worry about the gain knob, like the preamp gain knob, when you're using 32-bit float? Like, how can you give people advice in one way, and then for everybody else who's reading your documentation, you're saying another thing? Now, I want to just tell a little story. I love math, but I'm not good at it. And in college, my freshman year, my roommate Matt was in engineering, getting an engineering degree, and I was going for philosophy. But I've always loved science and engineering. I was like, oh, Matt, what classes are you taking? He said, I'm taking calculus, but it's at 7 a.m. I'm like, oh, I'll take it. So we both take this calculus class. 18 years old, right? 1979, 7 a.m. So I go to this class, and I sit like in the third row, and Matt sits in the first row. And the teacher goes on, and he says, oh, when the limit reaches 0. And I'm like, okay, yeah, when the limit reaches 0. It's like all class, I'm like, when is the limit going to reach 0? When is the limit going to reach 0? When am I going to learn the magic of calculus when the limit reaches 0? Seriously, this is what I'm thinking, right? Matt is in the first row like this. He's like falling asleep, and all of a sudden, like after 10 minutes, he'll like go like that, right? So basically, the whole semester, I was sitting there, rapt attention, waiting for the limit to reach 0, and Matt slept through the whole thing. Matt got an A, I got a C, okay? So I'm a C student in math, all right? But I try very hard. So it really, really tweaks me, right? When engineers that have degrees, right, the A students that slept through their class, that I'm working really hard to understand this stuff, that they put out stuff like this, that they mislead me. So I learned this stuff and I thought this was true for a while. And I had to do all the work to find out it's true. I do all the work to find out it's true. I contact them. I say, hey, listen, I know I'm a C student, but this seems wrong to me. And the guy says, yeah, you're right. But then they don't change any of their technical literature. So then other people are reading this stuff and they're getting the wrong idea. And when I do videos about 32-bit float, I get lots of comments like, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Because who am I against sound devices and their hundreds of engineers, right? I don't blame them. Yeah, Max, you don't know what you're talking about. So yeah, excuse me if I'm a little miffed, okay? And yeah, I'm sorry, sound devices, but either you watch this video and you fix this freaking document or whatever. Don't fix it. I mean, I don't care. I'm rambling now. Let me get back to the story. Okay. So I'm going to explain where the problem is. So it says record signals exceeding 0 dBFS. Now, let me go to my Basecamp. If any engineer who wanted to work at sound devices went there for an interview and they asked him, they said, okay, we'd love to have you join sound devices. What output comes out of a microphone preamp? If that person, that candidate for a job said, oh, dBs come out of the preamp, and like 0 dBFs, down to 20 dB, that's what comes out of the preamp, they would hire him? No. You can't quantize dBs. dBs is a scale. It's an essential multiplying factor to match physical data or physical properties to our human perception. That's why we have decibels. That's the only reason we have decibels. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I want you to focus on this. They're saying right in here, the primary benefit of these files is their ability to record signals exceeding 0 dBFS. Okay? What is 0 dBFS from an electronics point of view, from people that build preamps? It's the maximum voltage the preamp can output. So let's just say it's 1 volt. So 0 dBFS is set at 1 volt. The preamp can't do more than 1 volt, but let's just say it could. Let's just say all of a sudden the preamp can do 1.1 volts. Then the engineer would calibrate 0 dBFS to be 1.1. They won't keep it at 1. It's the maximum, and then it scales down. So that right there, in the second sentence, is a fantasy. It is not true. It is misleading. Then they say, okay, there's in fact so much headroom that that's wrong because it's starting from a wrong premise. It's not starting from the premise of engineering. It's starting from the premise of some marketing fantasy like, I don't know why this person is making this stuff up. I mean, to me, probably the engineers talked to the marketing guys and they said this, and the marketing guys just wrote it, and they went back to the engineers and they said, is this right? And the engineer's probably like, oh, I don't know, I can't deal with it, whatever. It's just marketing, we don't care. But again, this is about corporate integrity, that the CEO of Sound Devices doesn't come down and say to everybody, listen, we got to get this right, okay? If the marketing comes and we're putting out technical literature, that technical literature needs to be right. Because of all those C students like Max out there who, doesn't know what they're doing, we don't want to fill their head with the wrong knowledge. Okay. So then it says, it goes into the, I'm sorry. I should have had this on there, but yeah, I just want you to see again here. Record signals exceeding 0 dBFs, impossible, because 0 dB full scale is always set to the maximum voltage of the microphone preamp. Saying that there's so much headroom that from a fidelity standpoint, it doesn't matter what the gain is set with recording. Prove that to me, Sound Devices. Prove that to me. I haven't seen a single file that proves that to me. I haven't gotten a technical engineering discussion on how it does it. I haven't seen the files that do it. I see YouTubers making up crap on the internet saying that they're doing it because they don't understand how their own freaking software scales data. Anyway, so then they say, okay, the differences, they're going to go into the differences. So right here, down below, it says, numeric values represent a discrete voltage level corresponding to a signal amplitude. True, exactly. That should have been up here. The primary benefit of their files, this isn't a benefit because they'd say it right here. When you're quantizing the data, you're taking discrete voltage levels, which correspond to the loudness of the sound at that point in time. And then it says, 665,535 represents the maximum loudest signal that can be, and the lowest value represents a noise flow toggling between 0 and 1. So where are they getting this, right? First of all, this is incorrect. Yes, 665,000 whatever represents the maximum loudness that the signal can be, but that's not how microphone voltages work. They go in waves between plus and minus voltages. So let's go down. So it's saying 65,000 levels. True, but it's not. It's really 35,000 levels because you have to deal with the positive and negative voltages as the diaphragm moves back and forth over the coil. So now they have putting this noise in dB form. So when I see stuff like this, I'm like, oh, I just cannot deal with it. I just do not understand it. My eyes glaze over. Anyway, I see this, and I see a dB max is 0 dB. Again, I don't really understand what they're saying. I'm just taking their word for it. But I did some research, and it's wrong. Again, a C student should not be able to find that it's wrong. So they show that, just put these notes here. They show that the noise is, again, 96. But I said, again, if you were interviewing for a job and we're asking what range of voltages is quantized by the devices in 16-bit, the answer would not be 1 to 65,000. It would be negative 32,000 to positive 32,000. So the correct answer, factoring in how 16 bits deal with signs, is 90 dB. 90 dB, not 96. This is an incorrect number because it's dealing with voltages that they're all positive voltages. They're not. They swing between negative and positive. So it's not 96. And again, this is a minor point, but I'm not the one that should be bringing it up. And I did bring it up a year ago. Anyway. So it says 16-bit wave files, whether in a digital audio recorder or DAW software, call the largest signal captured 0 dBVS, meaning 0 dB relative to full scale of the file. So yeah, they're sort of saying what I'm saying. Now they go into the 16-bit, then they go into 24-bit, and they just say, hey, it's more data that we can represent these voltages. True, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. And then they go into the log thing, though again, the log thing is, well, I guess you could say it's right. It's actually 144.49. It's actually a little bit less because, again, this calculation is wrong. It's 1 over, what is it in the, it's 1 over 65,000. No, that was 16-bit. Oh, I didn't do 24-bit. Okay, we'll just skip past that. Okay, so, but whatever. Okay, this is doing the 24-bit. Remember, now they're saying the dB noise is at 144 dB and the max is at 0 dB. And up above, on the 16-bit, is saying the dB noise is negative and the max is 0, right? So I see a pattern here, right? When they're talking about dBs, whether 16-bit or 12-bit, the decibel max is set at 0 dB and the noise is set at the bottom decibels that you can actually pull out of that file, which is 96 dB, though again, it should be 90. Same thing for 24-bit. It's saying that, again, 0 is the max, again, because that is our maximum voltage, and then negative 144 is actually some voltage lower than the maximum voltage that we would measure as 144 decibels in human perception of sound. Human perception, okay? All right. So then, it goes into the stuff. It's more stuff. All right. So then it says this is functionally different than fixed point because those numbers in wave files are stored with scientific notation using decimal points and exponents, for example, blah, blah, blah. The difference is significant because much larger and smaller numbers can be represented compared to fixed point representation. True. That's why it's very useful to have these floating point numbers. So it all sort of started like with an Excel, like you have Excel, and if in 24-bit your maximum number is 16 million, and you want to talk about the wealth of the United States at 128 trillion, if you try and put 128 trillion into your spreadsheet, Before 32-bit float or 64-bit float or any of these float things, it would say Stack Overflow or some sort of error, right? Because it couldn't hold that number. So what float does is it basically says, okay, we know most people can use the numbers between 1 and 16 million. So those will be totally precise. But the numbers above 16 million or below like 1 over 16 million, yeah, we're going to use basically a mathematics that we can sort of represent very close to those numbers, but not exactly that number. So we may not be able to represent exactly 128 trillion down to the penny, but we can do it down to a nickel. And nobody's really going to care about a nickel when they're talking about 128 trillion. That's the drawback of float. And again, I'm not saying that it necessarily means that the audio is bad. I'm just saying that that is a mathematical fact. So for them to say in here that the only difference is that one is in scientific notation, one isn't, and to not mention the fact that there's no precision beyond 24-bit, again, this is bad engineering. So the comment here, but no mention of the cost, which is precision. Why? That's also a fundamental difference from fixed point. So again, if I'm learning from this document about float, I have learned incorrectly because they haven't even mentioned that. So anyway, they go into this stuff. Now this is where things get really funny, right? So in the other two cases, right, we had dB max at 770 dB. And the noise is at -7. Why is this a big number over 0? Why were the other two 0 and this is 700? Why is 32-bit different in that way? Now again, if you're not really paying attention, you're like, okay, I get it. Because again, they're not explaining it correctly from the beginning. And this is the pièce de résistance, whatever you call it. This is their, what word shall I use for this? This is their genius. And this graph is totally wrong. Totally wrong. I don't know how any engineer let this graph go out. 0 dBFS right here, again, is set to the maximum voltage of the preamp. There is nothing above it that gets quantized. And the voltages are positive and negative. So there actually should be a line. Let me see if I can draw a line very quick. So there should, in a sense, be a line here between them that is positive, and negative voltages, right? That's how it should be. But yes, it's 144 or 144.49 dBFS, dBs on 24-bit, and it's 90 something on the 16-bit. Yes. This here is an abomination of engineering writing. Where do they get this? Where is this coming from? How do they ever get this into the data space? If this is the maximum voltage of the preamp, how does that get there? It doesn't. This should be slid down to this, just like these other ones. If that's how you're going to measure it. That's what you do. You put them down to this. So, yeah, this is fantasy. This is infinity to beyond, right? Sorry. Infinity and Beyond is a movie, it's a Hollywood movie. It's a fantasy. So, again, I complained about this last year. The engineer showed to me that, yeah, we agreed that, yeah, it's, how it works. He said that, yeah, he doesn't advise people to use 32-bit float and forget about the gain. He understands these principles. But nobody at Sound Devices is like taking me seriously or taking, any criticism seriously. And they're just putting out, basically engineering schlock. And they're confusing people. Again, I'm a C student. I expect that when I'm learning that people that know better than me are not going to put false knowledge in my head. But why are they doing this? To make money. Because they want to catch unsuspecting people to buy Sound Devices equipment. And this isn't just Sound Devices. Again, my biggest beef is with Rode, not even Sound Devices. I think, again, most buyers of Sound Devices equipment, they know all this. They don't even read this document, or they skim through it. They don't care because they're just using it in a practical level. They know it works, just like this engineer at Sound Devices said, and they get the results that they want, and they're totally fine. But there are people buying equipment from Sound Devices, Zoom, Tascam, and now Panasonic they're buying on a false pretense. And I won't be surprised if there are class action suits in the future where people who bought this equipment will sue these companies because they made a false claim. They claim that 32-bit float, you don't need the gain knob to get the best audio that you can get, and that it prevents clipping. It doesn't. You can still get clipping in 32-bit float, and if you don't set the gain knob correctly in 32-bit float, you can still get suboptimal audio quality. Though again, in spoken word, almost no one ever notices. So let's just see if see if there's anything more here that I want to say. Let me go to my document. I think, I think I've handled all the points. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'll be curious to see what Sound Devices does. Again, I want to say, I am not criticizing the equipment that Sound Devices makes. From all reports, like Curtis Judd, he uses this professionally. He says it's great. I take his word for it. It's not about that. That's about your corporate and engineering integrity, that when you discuss the technical scientific aspects of anything in this world, that you treat others as you'd want to be treated if you're learning something. If you're learning something, that you would want somebody to take care into expressing things that work the way that you truly think that they work. And the thing that upsets me, like, how are we going to fight climate change? And I know you think I'm going completely off the rails here. How are we going to fix climate change if this is the way science is treated everywhere? And something as small as 32-bit float, nobody cares, right? And that's what's happening. I see this all over the scientific world, in pharma, in politics, why we have wars now. Because, no, we're not a scientific society. We're a society of like a fantasy, like, oh, I got to get this new equipment and be all powerful like Superman to infinity and beyond. Like all this desire of humans to be superhuman. Sorry, at some point we have to be adults here. So where am I at now on minutes? 22 minutes. All right. Well, if you made it this far, sorry to blather on. Thanks for watching. See you next time.